BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Black Box Ned 88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. So yesterday on the channel, I said that we were going to be doing a Zodiac Killer upload, and we had something to talk about today. And I had also realized that it's been a while on the channel since we talked about the Zodiac Killer hoax theory. We were going through some other suspects, such as Rick Marshall, Xenophon Anthony, as well as talking about the Kelly Marshall solution to the 3,4-D cipher, and I should say proposed solution. It's been a while since we've talked about the Zodiac Killer hoax theory, and I was going to talk about it today, but first I would like to give a shout out to YouTube user John Eisenor, who said, "Started listening to your channel recently, and it's much better than most I've seen." Thank you, John. You seem high on Horan's theory, though, talking about the Zodiac Killer hoax theory promoted by Thomas Henry Horan. I just don't buy the story. Don Chaney as the Zodiac makes a lot of sense to me. Once again, big thank you to John. We got that comment come in today, even though I was planning on talking about this one tonight. And I think that, first and foremost, let's begin by saying, I think the Zodiac Killer hoax theory, which goes in a nutshell version, that multiple people committed the Zodiac Killer murders from 1968 to 1969, starting in December of 1968 with Lake Herman Road, and culminating the canonical crimes on October 11th of 1969 with the murder of Paul Stein in Presidio Heights, that those murders were committed by different people, and one person, a Napa County deputy named Hal Snook, took credit for it by writing letters and either composing the ciphers or having somebody compose the ciphers for him. In short, trying to make people think that these different murders were committed by one person, that Hal Snook was all behind that. Well, I said that I wanted to talk about it for a couple of reasons. I listen to Thomas Horan's show, The Stones Unturned, regularly, and he does some live streams almost every weekend. And one of the things they were talking about is something that I had never heard before. And, I mean, with the Zodiac Killer mystery, there's just so much information out there. And he made a comment when he said that at Lake Berryessa, on September 27th, 1969, this is the time when the Zodiac Killer is wearing the hood, when he is tying the victims up and stabbing them. The only time that happened. Lake Berryessa is significant for a variety of reasons. It was the first crime that was committed in the fall of 1969. You can even say that. But also, it was the only crime that was committed during the daylight. I mean, there's just so many things that are different about Lake Berryessa compared to the other Zodiac Killer incidents, Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, and Presidio Heights. And, of course, you can also entertain the stabbing of Sherry Jo Bates. I personally do not think that is confirmed Zodiac activity, or the Kathleen Johns incident on March 22nd, 1970, which was an attempted abduction on Highway Route 132. I also don't think that was genuine Zodiac activity. But when you look at the Lake Berryessa stabbing, the stabbing of Brian Hartnell, and the murder of Cecilia Ann Shepard, Thomas Horan made the claim that samples of soil were collected from behind a tree where they believe the Zodiac Killer was, and almost certainly where the Zodiac Killer was. If we understand Cecilia Shepard's testimony, she's with Brian Hartnell on a blanket at Lake Berryessa, and they were looking out across the horizon, for lack of a better term. Maybe we should say a different word, talking about land. In their view, their vantage point, they're looking at the landscape. And Cecilia Shepard saw the Zodiac Killer without a hood on, but from an enormous, very, very substantial distance. Not one which I personally believe that they could make out distinguishing facial features. Let's just say they can't make out distinguishing facial features very far away, but she did see him pull the hood on. One of the reasons why that Thomas Horan was talking about them collecting samples is, he said it's possible that the Zodiac Killer urinated before the stabbing of Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Ann Shepard. And I was like, wow, I absolutely never would have thought of that. But if we look at either theory, the Zodiac hoax theory, that many people are involved with this, if you look at the single killer theory, I think that would make sense, because if this is the first time that this individual has committed a stabbing like this, that guy is probably either going to be nervous to the extreme levels, or perhaps he is definitely not going to, he doesn't want to risk urinating in his pants out of the culmination of the events. It's possible. Thomas Horan also suggested that it's possible that the Zodiac Killer threw up before the stabbing of Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Ann Shepard. I think if the Zodiac had vomited behind that that patch of trees before he emerged with the hood on at Lake Berryessa, that we would have known about that much more thoroughly. That would have been much more clearly documented, and everybody would be saying something about that if they had Zodiac Killer vomit. Now, what I would actually like to do in this upload is I would like to jump over to the Great Zodiac Killer Hoax Pro Board website. I mean, like the page on Pro Boards, I should say. And these things that we're going to be reading here are written by Thomas Henry Horn, and we're going to have a small discussion on that one. In 1986, Robert Graysmith, born Robert Graysmith Jr., published a book in which he revived the myth of the so-called Zodiac Killer, a tabloid news sensation of the late 1960s in the San Francisco Bay Area. The myth was created with the help of a series of letters and cryptograms, which had been mailed to the San Francisco Chronicle, a sensationalist and vigilante newspaper, which, thanks to the tireless efforts of the tabloid managing editor Scott J. Newhall, had risen to become the second biggest newspaper on the West Coast. And the thing that goes on here, we're going to jump ahead a little bit, is one of the things that Thomas Horn also possibly accuses Graysmith of is using a book by Gerald Frank on the Boston Strangler as a template to create Zodiac, because Thomas Horn's claim about this is that Robert Graysmith had access to all the police reports, and what Graysmith did was half of the sentences in the book Zodiac from 1986 are true, and the other half are false, that Graysmith added on a fictitious ending. If you ever listen to Thomas Henry Horn in interviews, he'll say, he lied, Graysmith lied. But when he says that, there's actually a little bit more to it than lying. It's very methodically altering specific details in a sentence. Once again, half of it is true and half of it is false. And what we can say, though, is there's another claim that Thomas Horn makes, which is actually much more interesting. I want to be very clear. I do not endorse the Zodiac Killer hoax theory. I like hearing about it. I like learning about it. There might be valuable pieces of information in it, but I do not endorse it, because the reason why I like listening to Thomas Henry Horn is because he makes some argumentative claims about the entire true crime world. And when he's talking about other writers who are promoting, like such as we said, Gerald Frank talking about the Boston Strangler and his suspect, and also Jack Mabley, who successfully railroaded the 18-year-old William Hirons into confessing to being the lipstick killer. I mean, that was a quotation that I was just reading off here. He's talking about how people pin down a suspect, and then they just try to force the narrative onto the suspect, whether or not they are actually guilty. And he's saying that this happens very frequently. And who did Graysmith put the blame on? First, an individual named William Joseph Grant. He's referred to as Andrew Todd Walker. And then Graysmith moved on to Arthur Lee Allen. In the 1986 book Zodiac, Graysmith referred to him, of course, as Robert Hall Starr. And they said that, I mean, just from reading Horn's own words here, I mean, let's just read the exact sentence. Graysmith in his 1986 book very nearly succeeded in framing a convicted sex offender, Arthur Lee Allen, for being the fictional Zodiac Killer, until DNA and other physical evidence started unraveling Graysmith's claim in 1999. So one of the things that I can say about the Zodiac hoax theory is, after listening to Thomas Henry Horn's show regularly, almost weekly, like very long live streams, maybe I'll listen to like 1 hour one day and then the next day listen to another hour. I try to get to them all, but sometimes I miss an episode here and there. After listening to his stuff very frequently, he really likes to go with that narrative. Okay, this writer has their suspect and they're trying to force the narrative on this suspect, and then here are the reasons why this writer overlooked very critical information from the police reports. That is his method. And I can definitely say that, once again, I like the perspective, but I am not 100% convinced. Some of the other things about this incident at Lake Berryessa with the Zodiac Killer possibly urinating behind the trees is that I completely misunderstood it at first. When they said the soil samples were collected, I thought he meant that the Zodiac Killer urinated and then picked up the soil and put it in a bag not to leave evidence. But after doing a little bit of reading online, that it wasn't what he meant, though. What he meant was that the police took soil samples, and it's possible because of urination, but a lot of people were saying this on other websites. Even if you were to Google this, you would find people talking about how they were looking for the footprints, or they're trying to see if something is the same. There's a big claim at Lake Berryessa. The type of boots that were left behind were not only military boot prints, but also wing walker Air Force boot prints, like wing walkers, like to walk on the wings of an airplane. And what somebody was proposing was The Zodiac was so methodical. I don't even remember where I heard this, saying that this is the type of person that probably used fake coverings on the bottom of his shoe. It's very easy. Many criminals do it. I mean, they put a fake covering on the bottom of their shoe, you can even just glue the sole of a shoe or the sole of a different boot onto this shoe, so then it would leave a different footprint. You can use, super glue or something, some type of adhesive. And sometimes people even put carpet squares under their feet to get rid of footprints, excuse me. Almost said fingerprints, we're talking about footprints. They would put carpet squares under their feet. I'm not saying the Zodiac Killer did that. I just wanted to be very clear that it is 100% within the realm of possibility that the Zodiac would have done something to alter the boot prints that are found at any crime scene, as well as the fact that the Zodiac Killer also said that he did not leave fingerprints, a very famous line that happened after the murder of Paul Stein when the Zodiac was writing in a letter saying that he didn't leave any fingerprints behind because he coated his fingers with airplane cement. So it's like, the Zodiac does seem to be somewhat methodical. Either that or Horn's theory is completely correct, and you actually have just a disconnected group of individuals, and somebody named Hal Snook took credit for the murders. Now, let's look at some bullet points that Thomas Horan lays out here on his Proboards page. Number 1, a serial killer was responsible for the murders of at least 5 or 6 young people in California during the 1960s. 5 confirmed victims, possibly Sherry Jo Bates, I'm sure he's talking about, and wounding at least 2 others, Mike Mageau and Brian Hartnell. The person responsible for these attacks wrote letters to newspapers proving that he was indeed the killer and was verified by the police. Robert Graysmith's 1986 book is more or less an accurate account of these events, and the actual law enforcement agency files, interviews, and key witnesses are all used to substantiate that. Even though the fingerprints, handwriting, and DNA all cleared Graysmith's suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, of being the Zodiac, nevertheless, he is still considered one of the most likely suspects out there. Thomas Horan is, of course, laying out the narrative. He doesn't believe that, of course. Well, what I would say about all of that is there are countless people online that think that Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac Killer. I get these comments all the time, very frequently. Someone's like, it's like, dude, what are you talking about? It was Arthur Lee Allen. Just stuff that is as simple as that. And now I think that there's a different narrative out there. I mean, I even just thought of it on my own that I was like, why not look at the possibility of Arthur Lee Allen having a partner? And I did the upload Arthur Lee Allen's partner. Countless people have written in saying that they were thinking the exact same thing. And we mentioned Don Chaney at the beginning. That is a big variant of the group murder theory, that it is really a partnership theory, that you would have had Arthur Lee Allen committing the murders and Don Chaney, his friend, who was supplying Graysmith with all this quote-unquote disinfo, or lots of hearsay testimony, we should say. A lot of that comes from Don Chaney, and you can read about that in Zodiac. Zodiac Unmasked talks about Don Chaney all the time and his little anecdotes of Arthur Lee Allen. Yeah, he told me that. Yeah, sure. Like, it's a very weird way to write a true crime book. We're talking about Zodiac Unmasked now, and we have a book discussion on that, and I'll include a link to that in the description box here. The best way you can support this channel is simply by listening to some more of our content, and if you would like to check out our book discussion on Zodiac Unmasked by Robert Graysmith, you can listen to Thomas Horan tear Graysmith apart, and you can also listen to us talking about Robert Graysmith and some of the things that he said in Zodiac Unmasked, available in the description box here. Now let's get to Thomas Henry Horan's challenges to Robert Graysmith. Okay, number 1, there is no actual evidence linking any 2 attacks in the Zodiac Killer mystery. Although the modus operandi of the 2 shootings in Vallejo does suggest a possible connection there and a likely suspect, the distinctly different modus operandi of the other attacks actually rules out a so-called serial killer overall. Survivors and witnesses described the assailant in 3 of these attacks, and the descriptions were all widely different. Furthermore, there are in fact very good suspects in each of these attacks, and each of these suspects can be ruled out in the other attacks. Well, those are some very bold statements, and what I can say about that first, that's a very big one there. The distinctly different modus operandi of the other attacks actually rules out a so-called serial killer? Not necessarily. Because what is one thing that we've been exploring lately on the channel, especially when we did our upload clues on the Mikado, and you guys have been leaving excellent comments, and I learned about how to put all of this into words, and even giving a shout out to Kelly, who said that it really appears that the Zodiac Killer, if you're going to entertain a single perpetrator, was somebody who was just acting out fantasies from comic books, from movies, from books like The Most Dangerous Game, as well as perhaps just other various works of literature, Detective Story magazine, and I hope to do an upload in the future, in the very near future, on the Zodiac Killer connection to Red Rider. That was something that Kelly had sent in recently, and I started Googling that. There are some great stuffs about the Zodiac Killer connections to all things Red Rider, so we can look at that. So if you have somebody who is almost staging these crimes like they are in a story or committing, or like in a multi-act play or something, or an operetta like the Mikado, or just different volumes of a comic book, not necessarily that the differences rule out a single perpetrator. I definitely thought a lot about the group murder theory. I was like, now if you look at Lake Herman Road, okay? You have two teenagers that are shot by a water pumping station road. Then you look at Blue Rock Springs. Two individuals are shot at a park on the 4th of July. Okay, those are a little bit similar, but then Lake Berryessa. During the daytime, the killer's wearing the hood. The killer is stabbing the victims, having a long, drawn-out conversation. The Paul Stein murder. There is no woman present. It's not a lover's lane. It's not anything of the sort. It's in downtown San Francisco. The wallet is stolen. A sort of trophy is taken by ripping off Paul Stein's shirt and mailing it in. All of that stuff is different. Absolutely and overwhelmingly, that stuff is different. But the big thing to say about that is, think about what we just said about somebody acting out fantasies that they learn about in comic books, movies, books, pieces of literature, magazines. And like, there are just countless references to various forms of literature. The Zodiac wasn't pulling these out of some type of schizophrenic delusion. Maybe, possibly, I shouldn't even speculate too much of that, but we can say there are definitive literature and literal references. I mean, I like killing people because it's so much fun. Man is the most dangerous animal of all. That's from The Most Dangerous Game. It's more fun than hunting wild game in the forest. That's from the Most Dangerous Game. And so there are many real connections to literature. I really just meant that the Zodiac wasn't making it up all in his mind. I shouldn't talk too much about the Zodiac killer's mental health because that's speculating in a direction that we shouldn't do in this upload. We'll do that in some other uploads. Next point. Contrary to what Robert Graysmith has claimed in his book, the actual law enforcement files not only show that the author of those letters could not have directly been involved in these crimes, they in fact show that Graysmith systematically misrepresented the contents of those files. The contents of the letters and the handwriting actually show that they were a hoax and reveal the identities of the hoaxers. Okay, let's say one thing about that. When he says that there's information that the real killer couldn't have possibly known, that would be something saying like, after Blue Rock Springs, the killer wrote in and said, the witnesses said that I left with screeching tires. I left really loudly and very quickly. But then there was actually somebody that was stopped later on named Andy Nicolatas Jr. who pulled into Blue Rock Springs Park, and then he pulled out and he left quietly. He was later questioned by the police. And I mean, yeah, that's just it. He's just saying, actually, I left quietly. You would have a 50-50 chance just by guessing to get that right. I mean, that's not a very precise piece of information. And the last point here on Horan's pro board, not only is Robert Graysmith's book Zodiac a shoddy attempt to frame Arthur Lee Allen for being the non-existent Zodiac killer, the entire book is in fact a hoax itself. There never was a Zodiac, and Robert Graysmith knew that at the time he published the book. Okay, number one though, we said that there were multiple perpetrators in this. What I've always said about the Zodiac killer hoax there, okay, not always, but one of the things that I realized during our discussions here on this channel, I didn't put this all together from the beginning, but I was like, oh, there was indeed a Zodiac killer. Whoever was putting on that hood at Lake Berryessa with the Zodiac symbol, writing the Zodiac symbol on the car door and listing the crimes and Zodiac activity, that person is your Zodiac killer. There definitely was a Zodiac killer, and Thomas Horan identifies Dennis Land. And he also says the letter writer, Hal Snook, possibly committed the murder of Paul Stein. Once again, then there really is a real Zodiac killer. Only the first two incidents in Horan's theory are hoaxes. And I've said a lot of this on the channel before, but I think it's a very important reiteration if we're going to read this off point by point, just saying that this is only halfway a hoax. By the summer of 1969, this takes on a life of its own. And that's purely just a label. I mean, that's just what you want to call it. But there definitely was indeed a real Zodiac killer who murdered people. For the sake of this message, whatever it was Hal Snook was trying to do with these letters in Horan's theory, I mean, was he trying to red light and green light the Manson family using the 408 ciphers, the green light for Manson's Helter Skelter. I am not convinced of that at all. Like on the scale of 1 to 10, that's like a 0.5 out of 10. It's I mean, I think it's a creative theory, but once again, that's highly unlikely. And then there's also the possibility that Hal Snook was sending coded messages to a CIA operative in Southeast Asia named Tony Poe. That's a little bit more likely, kind of in the middle of the deck, but not convinced at all. I mean, I say it's more likely than Hal Snook using the green light signal for Manson and Helter Skelter in the race war, and then the CIA is also going to be tied into that. I do not accept that. I can't even follow the narrative with that well enough to say about how each of the steps actually happen to say that it's actually 100